is Malala Yousafzai? Chapter 1. A Girl is Born. On July 12, 1997, Malala Yousafzai was born in the city of Mingora, Pakistan. Outside her parents' bedroom, a new day was about to begin. Soon the city would come alive with horns honking and people calling and music playing. But now it was early. The morning sun was rising behind the mountains outside the city. A rooster crowed. A scooter's engine revved. Like many families in their poor neighborhood, the Yousafzais couldn't afford a doctor or midwife. Instead, a neighbor woman arrived to deliver the baby. When Topekai Yousafzai was handed her first child, she left instant love. But there was also sadness in her heart. Topekai knew that was in store for this little girl. Her friends and neighbors in Mingora would not celebrate her birth. If she had been a boy, they would have bought gifts and food and poems. Topekai had grown up in a remote mountain village. Most girls did not go to school. However, Topekai wanted to learn. When she was 6, she went to the village school. But being a girl in school was so unusual that she soon left. In Mingora and many other areas of the Swat Valley, it was common for all children to attend school. The first girls' school was built in 1920s. High schools and colleges followed the rulers' belief that all children, girls as well as boys, should be educated. Pakistan was proud of the graduates in the Swat area who went on to become teachers, doctors, and other professionals. Malala's father had also grown up in a mountain village. He also believed in schooling for girls. When Ziauddin saw his new baby daughter, he did not feel disappointed. He felt proud. He would make sure that she would have the same chances in life as any boy. 3 years earlier, he had built a private elementary school for boys and girls. He called it the Kushal School. He was the teacher. Ziauddin planned to build more schools, then more and more. A high school for girls, another for boys, until every child in Mingora had a place to learn. Ziauddin had grown up in a religious Muslim family. His father was a teacher. He taught Ziauddin that children were scared and all children needed to learn. He explained that it was important to help others. Ziauddin listened. Ziauddin had been small for his age. His skin was darker than the other children. He'd stuttered when he tried to speak out in class. Sometimes children had bullied or ignored him. Sometimes he had felt like an outsider. Islam. Islam is a peaceful religion practiced by more than 1 billion people around the world. Muslims are followers of the Islamic faith. Islam teaches there is one God known as Allah in the Arabic language. The word of Allah are revealed in the sacred book of Islam called the Quran. Muslim houses of worship are called mosques. Now, coming back, many people tried to get him to join dangerous groups. They wanted him to think in a certain way. The more he read, the more he learned how to make up his own mind. When he grew up, he realized that school had saved him. At Malala's birth, Ziauddin looked down at his new daughter and wondered what her name should be. This child must be named for a strong, free woman. Ziauddin studied his family tree. It went back from 300 years, yet he could not find one girl's name listed. But in his Pashtun culture, there were so many heroines, so many names to choose from. In the end, he decided to name this baby after a brave young girl, Malalai of Maiwand. who loved her country greatly. Now, who are the Pashtun people? Let's learn that quickly. The Pashtun people live in the country of Afghanistan and in the northwest corner of Pakistan. Many live in the mountains and are used to a rugged life. Throughout history, the Pashtun people have struggled to fight off many enemies. The Pashtun are proud people. They have not wanted to lose their traditions. They believed in respect and generosity toward others. They value loyalty to family, friends, and neighbors. Almost all Pashtun people follow the Islamic religion. He raised his pen and wrote his new daughter's name, Malala. Now, who was Malalai of Maiwand? There was once a girl named Malalai. She lived in a tiny town in Afghanistan, not far from Pakistan. Malalai was the daughter of a shepherd. In 1880, the British were trying to take over Afghanistan. Many local boys and men joined the battle to stop them. Malalai's father and the men she loved fought too. The Battle of Maiwand took place near Malalai's home. Malalai helped care for wounded Afghan soldiers. Malalai was afraid for the men. She did not want them to give up. So she took off her veil and waved it. Then she began to sing, "The drop of my sweetheart's blood, shed in defense of the motherland. Will I put a beauty spot on my forehead, such as would put to shame the rose in the garden." The Afghan soldiers heard her song. They fought harder and won the battle. But during it, Malalai was shot and killed. Malalai of Maiwand is a hero. She is a girl who helped turn the tide and stop the British. Coming back to our story. Chapter 2. Born with Wings. When Malala was 2, her brother Kushal was born. The neighbors brought gifts and foods and laughter. This baby boy's future was full of possibilities, they said as they celebrated. He might even go to a university. Maybe he would become a doctor or a teacher like his father. Ziauddin was aware that Malala was listening. He was a polite man. He did not wish to offend his guests by pointing out that the schools he was building in Mingora were for boys and girls. Maybe Kushal and Malala would both go to a university and become doctors. Malala loved her father's schoolroom. Sometimes when she was little, she stood at the front of the empty classroom and pretended she was a teacher. As Malala grew up older, she enjoyed helping her mother prepare meals. When the family moved from their cramped rooms by the school, she couldn't wait to help her mother in their new garden. There was more space now. On most evenings, neighbors gathered on the porch and ate the food that Malala had helped prepare. Sometimes she sat with the women. They talked about their day and watched the sun set for the mountains that rose up beyond the lakes and pastures in the beautiful Swat Valley. Most of the time she joined the men. She loved listening to them swap stories and talk about politics. Often her father recited poetry or spoke of heroes like her namesake, Malalai. Sometimes he recited poems by his favorite poet, Rumi. Later, Malala would say that her father allowed her to grow. "He didn't give me something extra," she said, "but he never clipped my wings. He let me fly. He let me achieve my goals." Now, what were the poems of Rumi? Malala grew up listening to the poems of the great poet Rumi. Rumi was born on September 30, 1207. In what it is now the country of Afghanistan, he spoke and wrote about he thought was most important in life. Here are some of his sayings. "Ignore those that make you fearful and sad. I want to sing like the birds sing. not worrying about who hears or what they think. Don't be satisfied with stories, how things have gone with others. Unfold your own myth. Be a lamp or a lifeboat or ladder. Help someone's soul heal. Walk out of your house like a shepherd. Inside you, there's an artist you don't know about. Chapter 3, At Home in Mingora. By the time Malala's second brother, Atal, was born, more than 800 children were studying in Ziauddin's school. One elementary school for boys and girls. One high school for boys, one high school for girls. Malala was 7 and Kushal was almost 5 when the new baby came. Like most families in Pakistan, the whole family ate their meals together. Breakfast was served very early. Men and boys went to a nearby mosque, a place of worship, to pray. Women and girls said prayers at home. In her father's school, Malala took many courses. She studied 3 languages: Pashto, English and Urdu, the official language of Pakistan. She learned math, science, history and Islamic studies. Her mother, Topikai, was anxious to learn too. She couldn't read or write, but she enjoyed listening to her daughter talk about what she had learned at school that day. Like most of the children in her classes, Malala spoke Pashto at home. At school, the teachers taught in English and Urdu. Soon Malala was able to speak and understand all 3 languages. Some families paid a few dollars a month for their children to attend Ziauddin's low-cost private school. Other children could not afford to pay anything, but her father welcomed them anyway. Ziauddin and his family had a little more money now. They bought CDs and books. Malala loved to read. After finishing the Twilight series, she thought it would be fun to be a vampire. The Yousafzais also thought a TV. Sometimes they watched shows from Islamabad, the capital of Pakistan. And once in a while there were shows from faraway countries like England, Australia and America. Ugly Betty, a show about a girl who worked at a magazine, was one of Malala's favorite. Malala began to see that people spoke and dressed and acted differently in different places. Her parents explained that people may look different, but what matters is who they are inside. Malala loved going to the market with her mother. There were so many different stalls to visit. She bought small toys and sweets and shiny bracelets. She examined the colorful scarves and the new DVDs. She watched the cobbler making shoes and helped her mother pick out fruits and vegetables. As she grew older, she began to spread more time with the women and less time with the men. But often she served the men tea and stayed to listen. When she was 8 and 9, there seemed to be more talk about politics than poetry. And the more she heard, the more interested she became. Someone mentioned the war in the neighboring country of Afghanistan. A strict and violent group in power, the Taliban, made women obey severe laws. Girls and women could not leave the house unless they were with a man, and the man had to be a relative. Women could not work outside the home. Girls could not go to school. Many women who disobeyed the Taliban's laws had been badly beaten or put to death. Someone else mentioned a man on a local radio station. He was talking about stopping all girls in Mingora from going to school. Malala couldn't believe it. How could anyone say that girls shouldn't go to school? And like her brother Kushal, she enjoyed homework and writing papers and studying for tests. She had won many prizes for earning the highest grades or being the best in her class. She loved all the school books her father had found for his students to read. She loved speaking in front of the class and seeing her friends every day. Her friend Moniba, most of all. Muniba was smart too. Often she and Malala would get into silly fights. But that didn't mean that they weren't best friends. Malala couldn't imagine what her life would be like if she couldn't go to school. She was afraid. Chapter 4: Dangerous Times. When Malala was little, there were many tourists in Swat Valley. Some came for the summer music and dance festivals. Others sat by the Swat River or climbed in the mountains. Often they did not dress the same as the people in Swat. Malala knew that women and girls in different parts of the world followed different customs. Malala also knew that the Swat region was not as modern as some places in Pakistan. There were women in the big city of Islamabad who dressed like the women in Europe and the United States that she had seen on TV. Most women and girls in Mingora did not dress that way. They wrapped their bodies in scarves or cloak when they went out. They wore head scarves. In her mother's mountain village, women often dressed in an even more traditional way. They chose to wear a cloth garment called a burqa. Whenever they left in the house, the burqa covered their whole body and face with a cutout so they could see. In 2007, Malala was 10 years old. By then, members of the Taliban were taking over the Swat Valley. They said that all women had to wear burqas. The Taliban wanted to take away freedom from all women. On a radio station, a Taliban man was shouting frightening things. He announced that besides wearing burqas, girls and women in Mingora should stay at home. They could no longer go to the market alone. They could only go out with a male relative. Women who did not follow these rules would be punished. Was that all? No. Women would not be able to vote. They could not hold jobs. There would no longer be female doctors, and women weren't allowed to go to male doctors. They could not go to hospitals. That meant there were no way for sick women to be treated. Music and dancing were banned. All televisions and CDs and computers would be burned. Only religious books could be read. Girls' schools would be destroyed if they were not closed. Teachers and principals who continued to teach girls would be punished. The man was saying that good Muslims would never allow girls to go to school. Malala knew that wasn't true. Her family and friends and neighbors were all good Muslims. They were deeply religious. They prayed every day. They also believed that every child should be educated. At her religious school, Malala had learned that Muslims believed in peace and kindness and to others. One evening, a man came to Malala's house and told Ziauddin to close his girls' school. Malala's father refused. Malala was afraid. What if something happened to her father? Other schools were destroyed. The Taliban were breaking into homes. They were searching for illegal books. They were destroying TVs and video games. They closed the movie theaters and places where people had gone to listen to music and dance. Female doctors and teachers were leaving the area to find work in safer places. Women were no longer at the market and men were afraid, so many of the shops were closing. Men were no longer allowed to shave. Barber shops were closing too. Men with guns, Taliban members, were everywhere. People were frightened to go outside. Ziauddin kept the school open, but many students were afraid of the Taliban and stayed home. At the end of 2007, the Pakistan army arrived to stop the Taliban. Mingora and most of the Swat Valley became a war zone. There was bombing at night and during the day. Most people stayed in their homes, but some children continued to go to school. Malala was one of them. Fighting between the Pakistani soldiers and the Taliban went on through March of 2008. After many months, it seemed like the army was winning. Everybody hoped that the Taliban was gone for good. Life would be soon get back to normal. The Pakistan army moved out of the Swat Valley. But the Taliban had not gone away. The radio threats had started again. People who did not follow other orders were severely punished. Shops were burned by then. Of the 2008, more than 150 girls' schools in Mingora were destroyed. Malala realized her school was in danger. She also knew that she was lucky. If her school closed, her father would still continue to teach her. He would find math and science book and literature for her to read. But most girls in Mingora were not as lucky as she was. What would happen to them? Chapter 5: A Secret Diary. In December, Malala's worst fear came true. An order came from the Taliban. Girls' school in Mingora would not reopen after the winter break. The Taliban said boys could go back to school, but girls would not be returning. Malala and her friends were devastated. Could this be true? What would life be like if they couldn't go to school? One day, a BBC reporter in Pakistan asked Ziauddin for help. The BBC Urdu website was looking for a teacher to write about school closing in Mingora. Ziauddin talked to some teachers that refused. But they refused. They were afraid of Taliban. Writing about what was happening in their city was much too dangerous. Malala had spoken out before and she had enjoyed it. In September 2008, she had given a speech at a local club for reporters. The title of her speech was "How Dare the Taliban Take Away My Basic Right to Education." Newspapers all over Pakistan printed her words. She was glad to tell people how strongly she felt. She had said that she believed and nothing bad had happened. Ziauddin thought his daughter might be the perfect person to write the blog for the BBC. He asked Malala. She was only 11. She didn't know much about writing journals, but she was ready to try it. The BBC. The British Broadcasting Corporation, known as the BBC, is based in London, England. It broadcasts TV shows, radio programs, and webcasts all over the world. Including BBC America, journalists from the BBC report the news from all countries in many different languages. Malala's blog diary of a Pakistan schoolgirl was originally published on BBC Urdu website. Coming back, Malala's parents talked it over with the men from the BBC. Everyone knew that Malala would do a good job, but there was much to consider. Malala was worried that something bad might happen to her father if she wrote the blog. The man from the BBC was worried about Ziauddin too. He was also worried about Malala. Ziauddin wasn't worried about Malala. No one would hurt a child, he thought. That seemed impossible, out of the question. The man at the BBC talked to Malala and her parents many times. Finally, it was decided Malala would write the blog under one condition. She would use a fake name. Malala's blog would be called Diary of a Pakistani Schoolgirl. She would use the name Gul Makai. This was the name of a strong girl in a famous Pashtun folktale. Malala would write notes and read them to a reporter every day on the phone. She would tell him how she and her friends were feeling and what was going on at home in school. The reporter would put her words onto the website. The BBC website started to publish Diary of a Pakistani Schoolgirl on January 3, 2009. In Urdu and in English, other blogs posted followed. Malala's words were about getting ready for school and studying for her tests. All the girls worried that school might not reopen after winter break. There was bombing in the night and the girls were afraid. They were afraid that their school would be destroyed, like so many other schools in Mingora. However, the Pakistan army was fighting the Taliban. Maybe they would win and school would close after all. At the same time, the New York Times newspaper was making a film about the Taliban who were taking over the Swat district and closing girls' school in Mingora. The film featured Malala and her father. The cameras roamed Mingora for 6 months, filming the fighting between the Pakistan army and the Taliban fighters. Gunfire was heard everywhere. People were desperate to get out of the city. Terrified men, women, and children climbed onto the roofs of overcrowded buses and trucks that were leaving. Malala and Ziauddin talked about the bombs that exploded outside their home night after night, making it impossible to sleep. Malala said her father could no longer walk her to school. It was too dangerous for him to be seen outside. She liked her blue school uniform, she said, but now she couldn't wear it. The few students who still attended dressed in plain clothes so the Taliban wouldn't know where they were going. Her school would soon close, she said, covering her face, trying not to cry. She wanted to be a doctor. Doctors must study for many years. How could she ever realize her dream if there was no school to go to? In January 2009, the Taliban did the very thing that Malala had been dreading. All girls' schools would close for good on January 15. Boys' school would stay open, but girls would have to remain at home. On January 14, when school was over, Malala said goodbye to Muniba and all her other friends. No one knew what would happen next. Malala spent the days reading, getting into fights with her brothers, and talking to the BBC reporter. By February, Diary of a Pakistani Schoolgirl was being read all over Pakistan and in many other parts of the world. Malala continued writing it through March 12. The name Gul Makai was becoming well known in Swat. People wondered who it was. Malala didn't tell anyone. Because Ziauddin had started school for girls, many people wanted to interview him about what was happening in the Swat Valley. They wanted to talk to his daughter. Malala appeared on a Pakistani talk show. The host asked her questions about the war and school closing in Mingora. Most people in Pakistan believed in education for girls. They were upset about what was happening in the Swat Valley. Many had read Malala's diary. The Taliban leaders had to listen in February. It seemed as if the Taliban was having a change of heart. They announced that girl could go back to school. Malala and her friends couldn't wait to return to their studies. But even though some girls' schools were open again, the fighting in Mingora got worse. It was dangerous to walk in the city. Many students stayed home. Others left the city with their families. By May, Ziauddin saw that there were no choice. He closed the schools again. Malala and her family packed what they could and hurried out of Mingora. They spent the next few months living in the houses of relatives in safer cities nearby. Malala missed her books, her friends, and especially her school. But she was glad to be away from Mingora and the sound of exploding bombs. On July 24, the Yousafzai family finally returned to home. Mingora was a bombed-out shell of what it had once been. The war was over and the Taliban had removed into the hills. That was good. But the Taliban fighters knew how Malala was. She had spoken in public. She had been on TV. Many people who had read her BBC diary or watched the New York Times films, people were talking about her. In August, Malala's school finally reopened. Malala was too busy studying to worry about the Taliban. She had a new dream now. She wanted to become a politician. Politicians work to pass laws that they believe will benefit their country. Malala wanted to make sure that all children everywhere had the opportunity on studying. Chapter 6. Who is Malala? By autumn of 2012, Mingora appeared to have returned to normal. The Pakistan army had cleared the Taliban from the city. Once again, the streets were alive with scooters and rickshaws. Children were playing cricket outside. The movie theatre and barbershops had reopened. Some of Malala's friends' shows were back on TV. Many schools had been rebuilt, and the girls of Mingora had returned to their classrooms. Malala had become famous. In 2011, the Dutch Kids' Right Foundation had nominated her for the International Children's Peace Prize. The prize is presented every year to a child whose courageous or otherwise remarkable acts and thoughts had been a difference in countering problems which affects children around the world. She did not win that year, but it was an honor simply to be recognized. That same year, the Prime Minister of Pakistan had started the National Youth Peace Prize. It would be given each year to children under 18 who had been done the most for peace. Malala was awarded the prize. The name of the prize was later changed to the National Malala Peace Prize. Her family was proud of her, but they had become fearful. Malala rarely walked to or from school. Everyone knew that Taliban fighters had not gone far. They were out there somewhere in the hills surrounding Mingora. No one was sure what they would do next. On October 9, 2012, Malala was feeling happy and proud as she climbed onto the small school bus with her friends. She had studied hard for a test and thought she had done a good job. It was a warm fall day and the leaves were beginning to turn red and brown and yellow. Malala was 15 years old. Malala's small bus wasn't really a bus at all. It was more like a pickup truck with 3 rows of seats and a roof. The sides were covered, but the back of the bus was mostly open. The bus was crowded with high school girls and 3 teachers. Malala was sitting next to her friend Muniba. Everyone had been singing and talking about tests. Suddenly, the bus stopped and a man with a gun leaned into the back of the bus. "Who is Malala?" the man asked. Some of the girls glanced at Malala. The man watched their eyes. He knew the girl they were looking at must be the girl he was searching for. The man pointed the gun at Malala and pulled the trigger. Malala remembered very little about what happened after that. She did not remember being shot in the head. She had no memory of the helicopter that flew her to the military hospital in Peshawar, Pakistan, or her father arriving, or the surgery that saved her life. She was unaware of how sick she was after the operation, or the response to what had happened. Reporters gathered outside the hospital. Malala's picture appeared in newspapers all over the world. A local Taliban man had shot Malala, the article said. The news disgusted everyone, first in Pakistan, then everywhere. No one could believe that a young girl had been shot. A Muslim child being hurt like that was unheard of. Malala was famous around the world now. Some of the stories made her sound almost too good to be true. But Malala was a regular girl. She liked Justin Bieber's songs. Her favorite color was pink. She hated waking up early in the morning. She spent lots of time creating different hairstyles for herself. She wished she wasn't so short, and she really enjoyed going to school, just like billions of other kids. Yet her love of learning was the reason she had been shot. Malala was alive, yet remained very ill. Everyone at the hospital was worried about her. The operation was a success. Still, the doctors knew she would need the best care to recover completely. Malala was flown to a bigger hospital in Pakistan. She didn't remember that either. Soon Malala improved enough to be moved once again. This time to a hospital in Birmingham, England, that specialized in injuries like hers. Chapter 7. All I Want is an Education. On October 16, Malala woke up. A week before she had been singing on a school bus in Mingora. Now she was in England, more than 4,000 miles away from her home. Nothing seemed familiar. Malala looked around and realized that she was in a hospital. The doctors and nurses were speaking English. She couldn't talk because the doctors had put in a tube to help her breathe. Someone brought a board with the alphabet on it. Malala was able to spell it out and two words by pointing with a finger: country and father. She was told that she was in England. Her father was coming soon with the rest of her family. A few days later, her breathing tube was removed. The doctors didn't know if she could be able to speak. Everyone waited. Someone who spoke Urdu was called in. Malala started asking questions about where she was and what had happened. She remembered being on the school bus, but that was all. Was her mother coming? Her brothers? When would they arrive? The doctors were delighted that she could speak, but it would take a long time for Malala to recover. She couldn't move her face properly. Her hearing had been damaged. She would need more operations. When her family arrived, they lived in an apartment nearby. Later, when Malala finally was able to leave the hospital, they were moved to a bigger house in Birmingham, not far from the new school that she would attend. In order to get well, Malala needed months of exercise and special workouts. She needed to take walks at first, short, then longer and longer. Sometimes, as she walked through the streets of Birmingham, she felt sad. She missed her home in Pakistan. Everything was so different. The clothes, the food, the shops, the weather. People were kind, but they were new friends who did not share her memories and stories. When she wasn't at school or doing her homework, she talked to Muniba and her friends via Skype on her new computer. Malala wondered if she would ever see Pakistan again. It was difficult for the rest of the family too. Leaving Pakistan had happened so fast. There hadn't been time to pack their favorite things. They missed all the visitors who had gathered at their home in Mingora. They missed watching the sun set over the mountains. They felt safe now, but they were also lonely. Everyone wondered when they would see the homeland again. Chapter 8. Every woman, every boy, every girl. The news of Malala's shooting spread quickly around the world. People everywhere were horrified. This young girl had wanted to go to school. She had written a diary. She had spoken out. She had asked the world to help her get an education. For this, she had nearly lost her life. A month later, in November 2012, Ban Ki-moon, the Secretary General of the United Nations, declared that July 12, 2013, Malala's 16th birthday, would be Malala Day at the United Nations. Malala was invited to speak to the United Nations Youth Assembly in New York City. Every year, young people from all over the world meet the UN diplomats. They discuss what can be done to help children in their countries who are forced to work hard jobs at a very young age and very young girls who are forced to marry. The diplomats learn about children like Malala who are told they can no longer go to school. By the summer of 2013, Malala was well enough to travel on to the United States. She had spent 9 months recovering from her injuries. The operations on her face had been a success. An operation to improve her hearing had also worked. Malala was ready to show the world that a terrorist with a gun had not stopped her. She would continue to speak out. On July 12, 2013, Malala arrived at the United Nations headquarters with her family for the dialogue gathering. During the opening ceremony, everyone sang Happy Birthday to her. The room was crowded with diplomats and almost 1,000 young people from around the world. As she walked to the podium, they rose to their feet and clapped. Malala began to speak. She spoke in English. Her words were translated into many other languages through headphones. That way, everyone in the room could understand. They thought that the bullets would silence us, but they failed, she said. And out of that silence came thousands of words. The terrorists thought they would change my aims and stop my ambitions. But nothing changed in my life. Except this: weakness, fear, and hopelessness died. Strength, power, and courage was born. Malala talked about what had happened to her 9 months earlier. She did not hate the man who shot her. In fact, she would not shoot him if she had a gun. What she wanted to focus on was the need for peace. She mentioned Martin Luther King Jr., Mahatma Gandhi, and Mother Teresa, who had fought for their rights peacefully. Malala said, "Malala Day is not my day. Today is the day of every woman, every boy, and every girl who had raised their voice for their rights." Her father watched proudly from the first row. Beside him, her mother wiped tears from her eyes as she listened to her daughter. Like her husband, Topikai had always believed in education for girls. But Malala's struggle was for the right of women, and girls had changed her too. Topikai was going to school now. She had learned to read and write. She was studying hard to speak English. Malala was helping her with her homework. That night, news programs all over the world showed films, clips of Malala's speech. Like Gandhi, Martin Luther King Jr., and Nelson Mandela before her, Malala had started a peaceful movement to bring about change. Education is the only solution, she had said. Education is first. Chapter 9, the last chapter, A Girl with a Book. Life had changed very fast for Malala. When she was 11, she had spoken to local reporters about what was happening in the city of Mingora. On her 16th birthday, people everywhere had listened as she spoke at the United Nations. 3 months later, her best-selling book, I Am Malala, was published. Copies were sold all over the world. A shorter version for children was published the next day. On October 10, 2014, the Nobel Committee announced the winner of the Nobel Peace Prize. This prize is awarded to people who do not do something to make the world a better place. In 2014, Malala Yousafzai, age 17, of Pakistan, was chosen to share the Nobel Peace Prize. The other winner was Kailash Satyarthi, age 60, of India. The committee was honoring them for their struggle against the suppression of children and young people and for the right of all children to education. Malala was the youngest person who ever won the Nobel Prize. Her heroes Martin Luther King Jr., Mother Teresa, and Nelson Mandela had won the Nobel Peace Prize in years before her. Malala was in chemistry class in Birmingham when she heard that she had won the prize. It was 10:15 a.m. A teacher came into her class and told her. So, what did Malala do? She stayed at school. She went to her physics and science English class. She decided it should be a normal day. But of course, it wasn't a normal day. Malala was happy to share the prize with Kailash Satyarthi. He was from India and was done much to stop children from being sold into slavery. There had been tension between India and Pakistan, Malala's homeland, in the past. Perhaps they could work together to try to create friendship between their countries. When she heard that they had won, Malala said, "One is from Pakistan, one is from India. One believes in Hinduism, one strongly believes in Islam." And it gives a message to people who of love between Pakistan and India and between different religions. And we both support each other. It does not matter what's the color of your skin, what language do you speak, what religion you believe in. It was that we should all consider each other as human beings. On December 10, 2014, Malala and Kailash shared the stage at the Nobel Prize Award. A ceremony in Oslo, Norway, in her speech, Malala said, "This award is not just for me. It is for those forgotten children who want education. It is first those frightened children who want peace. It is for those voiceless children who want change." Like all Nobel Prize winners, Malala received a gold medal and prize money. Her part of the money, more than $500,000, would go into the Malala Fund, which helps children all over the world receive an education. The Malala Fund raises money to build and repair schools. It makes sure that there are safe places where young girls who were forced to work or marry can learn and study. It helps girls speak up for their right to go to school. Now Malala's name and face with her shy, beautiful smile are known around the world. She never planned on being famous. There was only one thing that Malala really wanted. It was something that most children take for granted. It was something worth fighting for. The right to go to school. Thank you for listening to me. And here our book is over.